Go ahead and get started. We have a lot to talk about today with Tier 3. It's really something that could be talked about for an hour or two, and we're going to cram it into hopefully a 30, 45-minute span. Um, so we'll jump on in. Okay, so we always start with going over a broad overview of what MTSS is. It's a uh, proactive preventative framework that integrates data and instruction to maximize student achievement. It's designed to catch students early and prevent failure, not simply respond to it. It's built on a foundation of strengths-based thinking. Instead of assessing to see what students are missing, we want to look at it from a different point of view, what students can do, and then use that data to determine what additional support they need. So we have 3 tiers. Tier 1 is high quality core instruction for all students. It's the foundation of everything else. Tier 2 is targeted. It's supplemental small group intervention for students who need additional support beyond Tier 1. That's approximately 10 to 15% of our students. And then Tier 3 is highly individualized intervention for the few students, the 3 to 5% who don't respond to Tier 1 and Tier 2 supports. And that's where we will focus our attention today, is on Tier 3. So before we go any further, I want you to type in the chat which tier you feel most confident in your school's current implementation. Do you feel most confident at Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3? You guys can just stick that in the chat. All right, we say Tier 1, some say Tier 2, some say Tier 3. So we have a variety going on here. Okay, awesome. All right. Good to know. Okay, the 5 domains of MTSS are screening, progress monitoring, database decision-making, multi-level prevention system, and infrastructure. So multi-level prevention system are the 3 tiers, and we should be asking, are tiers 1 and 2 strong enough? Tier 3 cannot compensate for weak universal instruction. And then for infrastructure, we want to ask, this is where leaders provide time, personnel, and resources to sustain the work. So your role as leaders is to live in the infrastructure and database decision-making domains, setting conditions for the work to happen. All right, here is our MTSS framework with our 3 pillars. Which column is currently the strongest in your school? And which is the greatest need? Database decision-making, sustainable teaming, or evidence-based practices? All right, MTSS has 2 pillars. It makes up response to intervention, the academic side and the behavior side. Behavior and academics are not separate systems. A student who cannot regulate their behavior cannot access instruction. A student who is struggling academically might exhibit behavior challenges as a result. So effective Tier 3 plans must consider both dimensions. And then common misconceptions is that MTSS is a special education initiative, and we know it is not. Some think it's just for some students. Actually, MTSS is for all because everyone gets Tier 1. And a lot of people think it's only for elementary school because that's primarily where it is focused, but that's not true. MTSS goes up through high school. And actually, I apply it in my own adult life. And then a program, it's not a program that you can purchase. MTSS fits with what you have in school already and just needs to be added to. All right. So looking ahead to 2032, we like to keep bringing this up. This is the work we're doing and why we're here. We want to make sure that all of our districts are prepared for the sunsetting of the discrepancy model, and districts will be expected to use MTSS for SLD eligibility. So we want to make sure you're prepared. It is a process. It's actually a long process. And so we want to go ahead and get that started. Those of you with the CLSD grant, you're getting to use this grant as an opportunity to get your systems in place so that you are prepared and ready. All right. And then the leader's role in MTSS implementation, we know strong administrator involvement is key. You're responsible for allocation of resources, providing those human resources, high quality instructional materials, and then scheduling, protecting time for sustainable teaming and meetings. All right. What is the leadership's role? So there are some key levers for administrators to use. So it's establishing the vision, culture, and mindset, conducting needs assessment. So that's an opportunity you can do at the summer conference coming up. Scheduling collaborative planning time, providing professional development based on the data collected, and then ensuring fidelity of implementation. So consistency, clarity, and sustainability are three keys to this. And then let's move on to our objectives today. So objective 1, we will define Tier 3 intensive intervention and its purpose in MTSS. We're going to describe the 5 steps of the DBI process, identify how intensification moves a student from Tier 2 to Tier 3, and apply the DBI decision-making through 2 case studies. All right, section 1, what is Tier 3? So in your mind, think about, what do you think Tier 3 is? What do you think is involved in Tier 3? And if you had to describe it to somebody, what would you say? Okay, so intensive intervention is designed to address severe and persistent learning and or behavior difficulties for the 3 to 5% of students who do not respond to Tier 1 and Tier 2 supports. It's driven by data. It's characterized by increased intensity and individualization. It's a sustained process, not a quick fix. And it's individualized to student need, not simply more Tier 2. All right. Why intensive intervention matters. So again, it's meant to be for those 3 to 5 students that aren't responding to validated Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions. And so I want to take a moment to really look at the word validated. This is why we really put an emphasis on Tier 1 and Tier 2, because if those aren't in place, it is really hard to do the DBI process, because the first thing you want to look at is what does Tier 1 look like? What does Tier 2 look like? So having those really established well will help you with this DBI process. Students with disabilities continue to fall behind peers in reading and math without intensive support. So that's another reason why this matters. And intensive interventions using systematic data can significantly improve outcomes, according to research. So the hard truth is sometimes Tier 3 is not functioning as designed. Students may be in intervention, but without individualization in Tier 3, or without frequent progress monitoring, consistent frequent progress monitoring, or without even a clear hypothesis about why they're not responding to good Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions. So we're going to look into that. Tier 3 is a process, not a program. Tier 3 is not a specific purchase program. It's not just providing more Tier 2 intervention. It's not always a one-on-one setting and it's not a permanent place or a label, but it is a systematic data-driven individualization process. That word's giving me trouble today. It's built on foundations of tier one and tier two fidelity, ongoing cycles of data analysis and adaptation, and it's a collaborative team-based approach to intensification. This shouldn't lie on any one person's shoulders to make decisions about tier three. So let's jump into the DBI process. What is it? Well, there are 5 steps. DBI process is a process for individualizing and intensifying interventions through the systematic use of assessment data, validated interventions, and research-based adaptation strategies. That's from NCII, which I will give you some resources from them. That is your go-to place for tier 3. So it starts with validated tier 2 interventions, progress monitoring, diagnostic data, adapting the intervention, and then monitoring and repeating. And this looks kind of like a linear process. It's actually a cyclical process. It actually starts back over with step 1, and you keep going through the process until a student is where they need to be. All right. So let's dive into step 1 a little further. So you want to begin with a validated tier 2 intervention. And so how do we do that? The DBI process is built on tier 1 and tier 2. A validated evidence-based standard protocol intervention must first be implemented with fidelity before DBI begins. So thinking about your own school and your MTSS process, this might be a new thought for you. You know, maybe you're thinking, hey, we are really good at tier 3, but what happens if you don't have tier 1 and tier 2 and strong systems in place for tier 1 and tier 2? Can tier 3 really be as strong as it needs to be? So it must be evidence-based, standardized interventions matched to the student's identified skill deficit. It needs to be delivered with fidelity, and this is where nobody likes the word fidelity anymore. But you know, if it isn't being delivered consistently, then how can we tell if the student is responding or not? If it's not on a consistent schedule, structure, or delivery, has the staff been trained on the delivery of the intervention? And DBI does not begin until validated tier 2 intervention has been tried and fidelity confirmed. So right there, that tells you, and as we get into this, you're going to see tier 3 really starts with good tier 2 interventions. You don't just hop, straight to that necessarily. A lot of times tier 3 is because you get to tier 3 because tier 2 isn't working, and we see that they need more support than that. So I hope that makes sense. You're going to want to look and make sure that your tier 2 is validated first. So think about your school right now. What validated tier 2 interventions are currently being used in your school? Do you know if they're being delivered with fidelity? And can you verify that they're evidence-based? And how do you know? Okay, so let's look at step 2. So we validated our tier 2 interventions and tier 1, and now we look at progress monitoring. So consistency is the key here. Irregular progress monitoring produces unreliable data that teams cannot use to make decisions. So what does consistency look like? Tier 2, progress monitoring maybe every 2 weeks, at least monthly. Tier 3, progress monitoring weekly or even more frequently for students with the most significant needs. Use the same validated progress monitoring measures consistently, and because switching tools mid-intervention might invalidate the data. And then you want to have a graphical representation. A lot of assessment programs will go ahead and put that on a graph for you so that you can measure the aim line and the data points. But if not, you can do you can do the graphing yourself. So NCII has actually some tools that you can use to graph that if you don't have a system in place to do it for you. So there are two possible outcomes. The student is responding, so you would continue the intervention. No need to change what's working, so continue monitoring until the goal is reached. On the other hand, the student may not be responding. So before assuming more intervention is needed, you want to verify fidelity. Then check, did the other students with similar profiles respond to the same intervention? So if you have a group of students and three or four of the five are responding, but this one student's not, then the student's non-response is informative and you'd want to move to step 3. So let's move to step 3. So if you decide, okay, our tier 2 has been validated, we know it was delivered with fidelity, we see other students in the same group responding, then we need to collect some more diagnostic data. So this is where students, where you're going to start individualizing. And this is honestly where a lot of people get stuck or they skip this part. But when a student's not responding, you know, sometimes the instinct is to do more tier 2 or just, you know, add some more time and go straight to that. But without diagnostic data, we're just guessing. The purpose of diagnostic data is to collect and build a hypothesis, a clear evidence-based statement about why the student isn't responding when other students are. So, and then that hypothesis drives the adaptation in step 4 that we'll talk about in a minute. So, so we want to review progress monitoring probes. We want to look at classroom assessments and daily intervention engagement logs. We want to conduct informal diagnostic assessments targeted to the skill, so maybe a phonics or phonemic awareness inventory, fluency probe. We want to look at attendance and behavior. We want to have that whole child view. So some of you, they're using the whole child, the triangulation template. This is great for this type of thing because if you say, oh my gosh, well, they're absent all the time, that might be why they're not responding, or they're having a lot of uh, office referrals. They're in the office a lot or sitting out in the hall. We know we've all seen that before. That might be why they're not responding. So having that whole child view is super important. And then use all of that data to develop a preliminary hypothesis about why they may not be responding. So the hypothesis is a well-informed, and it will sound something like, so-and-so is not responding because, and then you'll name the specific skill deficit, which is not being adequately addressed by the current intervention. And then you'll see here in our next step how you'll put that together. So think of a student in your school who's currently receiving tier 3. Does your team have a clear written hypothesis about why that student wasn't responding to tier 2 interventions? And what data would you need to be able to write a hypothesis? All right, so moving on to step 4. So we've collected all of our progress monitor data. So now we're in step 4. So we are going to adapt the intervention. So based on everything we know, we are going to either reduce group size, narrow the focus, increase the frequency or the duration, the dosage of it, or modify the content delivery, maybe add more modeling, opportunities to respond. And we'll talk about these specifically here in just a minute and what they might look like. But you know, think about the healthcare model. So if you're taking medicine and it's not working, what does the doctor usually do? So are they going to give you something random that doesn't fit the need? If you have high blood pressure, are they going to give you something for nausea? That was a silly example, but that's all I can think of. But no, they're going to make sure that it's narrowed to your the focus that they need. And then also they might they might up the dosage, right? They're not going to take it away. And so so let's look at how that that might play out. All right, so we'll go into that in just a minute. So let's look at step 5. So once you implement the adapted intervention, you'll collect progress monitor data consistently. Usually at this stage, we're doing it weekly, right? And then we're going to analyze the data for responsiveness or not. So if you adapt the intervention and then you progress monitor and you knows, oh, this is making a difference, then you're going to continue with the intervention and monitor until their goal is reached. And then if not responsive, we're going to go back to step 3, look at our diagnostic data or collect some more and refine the hypothesis. So let's talk about DBI with, well, think about this. Imagine if a student's been in tier 3 for 12 weeks with no significant progress. That's a lot of wasted time, right? In a school year. That is, so, that's why we want to quickly be consistently monitoring that progress and make changes. We can't just let them, wait for them to fall through. We need to be watching to make sure that there's progress being made. So let's talk about DBI though with MTSS. It's built on strong tier 1 and tier 2. The quality and fidelity of universal and targeted supports, valid progress monitoring, and database decision structures are the foundation for successful DBI implementation. And then let's talk about how it connects with special education. So we know that many students that need DBI also have disabilities, right? And it provides a systematic database process for designing specialized instruction, evaluating IEP goals, and intensifying supports when progress is insufficient. So DBI is not a special education process. It's a general ed process that applies to all students receiving intensive intervention, regardless of the disability status. And many students who need DBI do have disabilities. And for those, this provides data, systems, and structures for what to do next. And then, like I said, it can help inform the IEP goals. All right, so let's look at section 3. So a minute ago, I said, hey, we'll look at this specifically. So when you're looking to change your intervention, moving from tier 2 to tier 3, there are certain things you want to look at. So intensification adjusts how the intervention is delivered, not necessarily what program is used. So you don't have to go to a whole different program. We're going to look at, so in tier 2, you may have small groups of 3 to 5 students with the same skill deficit. You use the standard protocol, 20 to 30 minutes daily. Okay, so if they're in a phonics group, we're using the standard protocol. We use this. Tier 3 changes would look like a smaller group or 1-to-1. It doesn't have to be 1-to-1, but a smaller group, a more narrowed focus, a specific subskill, and adapted based on the diagnostic data, increased frequency and duration. The key question here is what specific dimension of intensity needs to increase? Should it be the strength, the dosage, alignment, comprehensiveness, or individualization? And so this may be familiar to some of you because we've actually talked about this in some of our other leading OKMTSS calls. But the taxonomy of intervention intensity, this was done by NCII and is evidence-based. There are 7 dimension teams. 7 dimensions teams use to systematically build and evaluate intensity. So there's strength, dosage, alignment, transfer, comprehensiveness, behavioral support, and individualization. I'll let you look at those for a minute. And I do like to point out the behavioral support because a lot of times we're like, yeah, this kid is just, they don't care, they are not engaged. They have no motivation. And that plays a big part in how you would change your intervention up. Okay, so let's move on to a case study and apply what we've been talking about to particular students. So we're going to start with a case study of a made-up person named Marcus. And this is third grade reading, applying the DBI process. So Marcus is a third grade student. We're looking at mid-year data. So his fall benchmark was 42 words per minute. And the grade 3 benchmark is 90. This is made up, okay, is 90. Tier 2 interventions, he's doing explicit small group phonics fluency program. He's in a group with 5 other students for 30 minutes, 4 times a week. And he was set to do that for 8 weeks, or he's been doing it for 8 weeks. And fidelity has been confirmed at 95%. That means it has been implemented. Looking back at the records, he's been there and received the intervention 95% of the time. And 3 out of 5 peers responded. Okay, so let's look at this. So of the 8 weeks of progress monitoring, oral reading fluency, words correct per minute. So this baseline was 42. And then after progress monitoring the next week, he was a 44, then a 43, 47, 45, 48, then back down to 46, 49, and 50. So do any of you ever see that kind of data where it looks like this? It kind of goes straight across instead of like sloping up. It's, so that's really not adequate growth. So he ended with 50 words per minute, and we were wanting him to be at 70. We had set his goal at 70. Okay, so it's time for the team decision. So we've reviewed Marcus's data. Fidelity was confirmed. 3 of 5 peers in his group did show progress. Marcus's scores after 8 weeks hover between the 44 and 50 words correct per minute, and those were all below the goal line. So here are the questions we want to ask. Is Marcus responding or not responding to Tier 2 intervention? What is your evidence? So do you guys think he's responding or not responding? You can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. All right. What additional data would you want to collect before adapting the intervention? So thinking about what we talked about earlier, what would we need to do? And then based on what you know, what's your initial hypothesis about why Marcus is not responding? So if you had to come up with a hypothesis right now, what do you think what would be the reason do you think that he would not be responding? All right, so our diagnostic findings. So we did some more diagnostic work, right? That's what we're going to do next in the DBI process. If he's not responding and others are, we're going to have to dig down and collect some more data. So we've checked and his phonological awareness is intact. He passes the screening fine. Phonics patterns, 82% accuracy, which is adequate. I mean, we want it to be better than that, but it's not like a tank. Multisyllabic words come out at 58% accuracy. And we know that that's a big thing in 3rd grade, right? And then, so that shows a significant deficit. And then oral reading is labored. So this is observational data. If you're listening to him, he's labored on 3+ syllable words. He really gets stuck on those, which is slowing him way down. Self-correction rate is low, so he's not going back and self-correcting. And so the team hypothesis might look like this: that his reading fluency is limited primarily by a specific deficit in multisyllabic word reading. So that's what's really tripping him up. The current intervention does not provide sufficient targeted instruction or practice in syllabication and morphology to address this gap. Without automaticity on multisyllabic words, his fluency growth will remain stalled. So we're over and over trying to get him to read passages with lots of multisyllabic words, and he just really doesn't know how to do that, how to break them apart. So we're going to adapt the intervention. So we're going to look at the group size and reduce him down from 5 students to 2. We're going to increase modeling and feedback and opportunities to respond for each student. We're going to change the focus. We're going to add in explicit morphology instruction. We're going to focus on prefixes, suffixes, and syllabication strategies, targeting 2 to 3 syllable words. We're going to increase it as dosage from 4 times to 5 times per week and add 2 minutes of daily repeated reading with phrase cued text to build fluency rate. And then we're going to progress monitor weekly using oral reading for fluency probes. We're going to add in a bi-weekly multisyllabic word reading probe as secondary measure aligned to the new focus. So we're going to like really focus, is he being able to do that? And then also giving the oral reading probe. Okay, does that look like, do you think that might make some difference with him and his oral reading fluency? I would think so. Okay, so let's look at one more. Let's look at Jasmine. So Jasmine's a 5th grader. It's winter benchmark. Oral reading fluency is 58 words per minute. Grade 5 benchmark is 130, so that would be high risk, very, very far behind. The comprehension probe is at 42%, and benchmark is greater than 70. Tier 2 is she's receiving explicit comprehension strategy group. She's in an explicit comprehension strategy group. She has 4 students in her group. They meet 25 minutes 4 times a week for 8 weeks. She's been doing it for 8 weeks. Fidelity has been confirmed. So implementation fidelity, it's been delivered as designed. It's happening. And 2 of the 4 peers are responding to that. So I bet you already have some things in your mind about what might be going wrong with Jasmine. So let's look at her baseline. This is the comprehension. So her baseline was 42% comprehension. It's went up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, and it just hasn't really done. If you put this on a graph, what would your line look like? Would we have like a continuous slope, even a small continuous slope? Not really. It's just like doing this, okay? Not responding. So we want to review her data. Fidelity, like I said, I'm going to skip that part. We actually just did that. So team discussion questions. So is she responding or not? Doesn't look like it, right? The intervention targeted comprehension strategies is what she's doing, but look at her oral reading fluency score. I think we missed something in the original when we prescribed the intervention in the first place. I think we skipped right over the oral reading fluency problem. What additional assessment data would help you determine why she's not responding? So we want to look at some diagnostic data, right? We want to look at decoding isolated words, 91%. So it's not that. But when given connected text fluency, it's at 58 words per minute. It's way below where she needs to be as a 5th grader, right? Academic vocabulary is limited on grade level content text. And so our conclusion is that the fluency bottleneck is really what's overwhelming the comprehension capacity. So our team hypothesis would look like this. Low reading fluency consumes cognitive resources, leaving insufficient capacity for comprehension. Teaching comprehension strategies directly does not address the underlying bottleneck. Fluency must be targeted first. So to adapt her plan, we would shift the focus to fluency and add in vocabulary. Reduce the group from 4 to 3 students, increase to 5 times a week. We want to include repeated readings with grade level text. Okay, same as their tier 1 core. Semantic mapping for academic vocabulary. And then monitoring oral reading fluency weekly and then comprehension bi-weekly. Because as the oral reading fluency increases, probably the comprehension is going to as well, even if we're not doing direct intervention on that. So those are 2 examples of how you would look at a student who's not responding to tier 2 and needing to move to tier 3 and how you would individualize it. All right, so key takeaways. I'll let you look at those and think if there's any other key takeaways that you may have today. All right, so DBI is a cycle. It's not a one-time event. Teams must commit to ongoing regular data review and adaptation. The work's never done until the student reaches the goal. And then alignment is everything. The most important question in tier three is not what are we doing, but does what we are doing match what the student actually needs? Misalignment wastes time and fails the students. And then decisions based on data. Every decision about whether to continue, adapt, change an intervention must be based on objective progress monitoring and diagnostic data, not staff intuition or program loyalty. Well, we have to do this. It needs to be based on what the student needs. And then teams drive the process. I hope that you picked up on that. This is no single educator carries this burden alone. Sustainable tier three implementation requires multidisciplinary teams, shared ownership, and regular collaborative problem solving. Okay. So next steps. Think about your current tier three students. Is the intervention adapted based on diagnostic data? Is there a clear hypothesis driving each adaptation? And is progress monitoring aligned to the intervention target? Three areas to audit in your tier three students. And verifying that tier two fidelity, super important. But it starts with that tier one as well. So there's a lot in to making the decisions for all of this. All right, so resources and links. So I'm providing some links. Paige or Tyler are on here, and they're going to throw some things in the chat. I'm looking, Jolynn, I just saw where you put, what about attendance? Attendance is huge, right? If they're not there, it doesn't matter how good your instruction is. If they're not there, we need an attendance intervention. And so you may just have to be creative, and you might have to send the resource officer to pick up a student, right? Or you may have a special check-in, check-out with someone that they are close to, have a relationship with. Simple, things. Also, why are they not coming? Maybe digging into that. Is it a roadblock with transportation? Is it because, you know, Yes, or even have to involve DHS with it. That's right. Yeah. I mean, if there's truancy involved there, definitely. So like I said, it doesn't matter how good your instruction is and your tiered interventions. If they're not there to get it, it's not going to work. So definitely. And that's the importance of looking at that whole child. So intervention intensification strategy checklist. This is a great checklist to use if you're making adaptations to your interventions. Like, have this printed out, laminated during your meetings, and it'll really help guide the decision making. And then here's the taxonomy of intervention intensity. A link to that. Love this. That's another one you want to have printed out at your meetings. And I will say these meetings, they might look different than your regular tier two meetings. This might be a whole different group. This might be your special ed director, your special ed teacher, your speech pathologist, and it could be your um, principal. It might be just, a select group of people that really look deep into this information for these tier three students. And again, it's supposed to be just those 3 to 5%. And I know some of you are going, because I know there was a time where I was like 3 to 5%. What? We have more than 3 to 5% needing tier three intervention. But that means that we have like some issues then with tier one and tier two. All right, Donna says, where are these links available? So Tyler's putting them in the chat right now, Donna. So if you guys want to click on those, I think she's putting I will put the others in there real quick. Copy link. There's that one. Oh, she just did it too. We're doing the same thing, so I'll let her finish that last one. All right. So she's going to put those 3 links in the chat. Oh, I love this one, the clarifying questions to create a hypothesis. So you start implementing this, this really will help you ask the right questions that you want to go through. Um, really great resources here. All right. If you don't mind, if you would scan that QR code and complete the survey, we'll also, I'm going to put that in the chat too, just in case. You want to just click on it. That might be easier. If you don't have your phone. And give us some feedback on how today's session was. Hopefully you gained some good information.